Mech pilots, online. BattleTech manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech podcast.
In our 22nd deployment of BungleTech, my spheroid co-host Michael and I discuss and share our Bodacious BattleTech Bungle Questionnaire, named the BungleTest, as we put the question to you of how bungle-proof are we all really? In our extraordinary Proclamation segment, we formally changed the name of our bungling clan as we welcome new members to it and announce the official name of our totem Mech the Bungler. In our battlefield outcome report, break down the devastating destruction of our very own mech on the battlefield. And in our Stories of the Inner Sphere segment, read a sample of the short story, Glorious Labor for the Celestial Wisdom, a Capellan Servitor's Guide to Proper Conduct. Amp up your adrenaline, mech warriors! It's time to yank out those dusty operation manuals and put your knowledge to the test.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary Proclamation. Initiating.
Before we get to the steamy broccoli of today's episode, I wanted to quickly announce the result of our Bungler official name poll. First, super appreciate everyone who took time to vote on the name of the mech. Drum roll, please. And the name of the mech is the Bunker. Huzzah! Again, a big thanks to everyone who voted. You can find the record sheet of the Bunker, aka the Bungler, linked in the show notes of our previous episode. And you can expect a game mode coming out soon utilizing the mech that we will share in our game mode collection document. And now, a quick word from our con.
Brothers, sisters, and greater family, today I come with a story of trials and tribulations as I welcome our newest members to the clan. On a recent incursion into our founder's home space, Mech Warrior Ed Megleton was charged with fording into unknown territories with only Technician Blunderdome at his side. And they encountered horror firsthand. The rage of the Kodama. Through only sheer determination, they clawed their way through voracious packs of the beasts. And without the assistance of our newly acquired bondsperson Rob Prescott, surely they would have been doomed. Mech Warrior Ed Megleton, Technician Blunderdome, and bondsperson Rob Prescott. You have returned bloodied, but within your eyes, I see the burning passion of our clan. We welcome you! Fellows, I have seen the rage of the Kodama with my own eyes, both open and closed. And I know of the power and the camaraderie of their kind. The feat of Ed Blunderdome and Rob will be instilled in our remembrance, but beyond just their recent act. For today, I say to you all, is there no better creature that embodies the spirit of our people? Confident and unified, yet with the capacity of great insanity, viciousness, and mercilessness. Like the Kodama, clan strong together! Therefore, I formally announce the rebirth of Clan Bungling Tech as Clan Kodama. Let all our enemies know that when they face one of us, they face all of us.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. In order to support the enormous energy requirements of laser rifles, advanced power storage systems must be carried. These usually take the form of power mags, which are attached to the weapon for convenient carrying and swapping, or as larger power packs, connected through heavy-duty cables and attached to the belt, shoulder, or back. While they seem small, the energy density of these packs is impressive. Take, for example, the Optronics T7R Star Power Belt Pack. Weighing 2.2 kilograms, this belt-worn battery is rated for 100 megajoules of nominal discharge, the equivalent of 3 liters of liquid hydrocarbon fuel, or 25 kilograms of TNT explosives, or 3,400 almonds, or enough energy to launch a 1 kilogram mass, perhaps your flak helmet, into orbit around a Class M planet. Now you know about the sphere we live in. The sphere we live in is made possible thanks to the support of Loremasters Magnum Danger and Retro Laser, as well as contributions to your BungleTech Patreon from listeners like you. Thank you.
Primary objective, podcast topic segment, initiating.
Hello, everybody. Glorious friends. Welcome to episode 22 of BungleTech, a BattleTech podcast. I am privileged, honored, and extremely satisfied to be joined today by my wonderfully sensual co-host, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Well, as long as you're satisfied.
I'm beyond satisfied. I'm like, you know, on those like little surveys where I click the smiley faces, my like smiley face is little heart eyes. Click, just clicked it.
So you're doing well today.
I am doing well. We struggled with some technical issues before the recording, everybody. I was in, the dumps a little bit. But being in the presence of Michael just fills me up with zeal. So I'm ready to rock this episode. But Michael, what is today's episode even about?
Well, we've been cooking up for the past month an exciting new BungleTech project, the BungleTest. We didn't workshop that name, but it just sort of happened this morning. So it's the BungleTest, and we're gonna be walking you listeners all through sort of what that is, what our plans are, and how you're going to be able to get in there and participate and make your mark on. I don't even know what. I don't know why we're doing this. I'm going to be honest. It's stupid and fun.
There aren't enough quizzes in the world, Michael. That's why we need more tests. We need more quizzes. We need more ways to evaluate and judge ourselves. I just don't have enough reasons to judge myself.
Yeah, man, with the loss of BuzzFeed, the whole like online quiz marketplace, it's just in the dumpsters. We're just helping restore balance to the force.
Yeah, we're going to transition BungleTech specifically to a quiz format. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then we can just start diverging to Star Wars quizzes, to Warhammer quizzes, to philosophy quizzes, to cat and dog quizzes, to food quizzes, to travel quizzes. Michael, I can keep going. There's so many quizzes to make.
This is what happens when Nathan is full of zeal. He's overflowing with zeal all over the podcast.
Too much zeal. Too much zeal. Okay, well, yeah, that's a good question or a good comment, Michael. Like, why are we doing a test or a quiz?
Thought it'd be funny.
That in many ways is true. I think that one thing that we often hear from our listeners is they appreciate how open we are about our mistakes. And everyone acknowledges that you don't know you're making a mistake until it's brought to your attention. And there's so many things we learn at the table through either circumstance, or what another player says, perhaps a very charismatic, handsome, muscly player named Nathan says, and people just believe this player for whatever reason because, oh God, his smile, this Nathan's smile, I'm telling you guys, if you see this guy, you're going to get it.
No one else has read TAC Ops.
And so you just believe it. You just believe it, and then it becomes a habit, and then you teach it to other people, and then it just goes on and on and on. So we were discussing how fun would it be to create a core level test that went over different elements of classic BattleTech and actually put your knowledge to the test.
Yeah, you too can participate. Find out how much of a bungler you truly are. I don't actually know whether the goal is to get a high or a low score on this quiz. Nathan?
I think you're a winner either way. I say that as you look at your lower score. Just imagine me hugging you. You're a winner, buddy. You're a winner. And then if you get a really high score, it's a pat on the shoulder. You're a winner. Bam. So either way, you're a winner. It's just the context of you being a winner is slightly different.
Yeah, I think this is sort of fun to go through, and I think we're trying to not necessarily cover, it's not like a quiz of bungles that we've done, but places where we think there might be bungles, places where the rules get a little bit weird or gnarly, and also just some straightforward questions. A lot of our bungles come from very straightforward things that should be obvious, but like Nathan says, you can build up these misconceptions. Your table plays them for years. You might never notice unless you're visiting another city and seeing how their local game store plays it. These things happen.
Totally. And we've mentioned the concept of rule fatigue before. And basically, you're just there at the table. You just want to roll some dice. You just want to have a good time. And popping out a rule book, flipping through it, honestly, that can sap the energy out of the game pretty quick. So you understand how calls are made on the table. And sometimes those calls become just embedded in the brain as the way to go. I always think about how many times do you need to do the correct rule before it overwrites your immediate recollection of the incorrect way of that rule if you've been doing something incorrectly for years. And for me, I think it's probably I have to do the correct rule 2,000 times for every 2 times I've done the rule wrong, because I definitely tend to lean towards the wrong ones always instinctually. I need to go on a mountain and just meditate and just practice just rolling by myself the right rules, and just, I need a mantra. Oh, I got a good one. Present moment, correct rules. Past moment, incorrect rules. Huh? There you go. Breathe in,
I don't
breathe
know what
out.
that means.
It's a mantra, man. Come on. Get with it. We're also starting a cult.
And
too, just so you guys know.
talking about cracking open a book and flipping through the rules, I don't really know, but I sort of get the sense that a lot of people who play BattleTech, particularly sort of the older guard, may never have just sat down and read a rule book. I personally, I'm the sort of person, I've played a lot of role-playing games. I always read a lot of books. Starting a new game, I always would pick up the book and read it cover to cover, make sure I understood all the rules before I ever played it a single time. But I didn't do that with BattleTech, and partly that was because the books I found really hard to go through, and there were a bunch of different books, and I didn't know which ones mattered. It didn't help that Nathan plays with all of the advanced rules, so I was doomed from the start, really. But I suspect there's a lot of feeling your way through the rules, doing what seems correct, because it's sort of a touchy, sort of verisimilitude-y game where everything sort of feels right, so you just go by what feels right, or by the oral tradition at your table where they tell you how to do it. So my introduction to BattleTech, I hadn't read a rule book. I just went by what I was told to roll. Everyone was like, oh, and then you add this, and then you do this math, and da 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 da, and then you roll these dice. If you get a 7 or more, then you shoot them in the face. So my instinct is a lot of people have also developed there, particularly, like I say, the older generation. Nowadays, we've got the BattleTech manual. BattleTech manual is great at introducing the rules. But before we had that, I suspect a lot of people have very notional understandings of like Gator. we understand Gator, but like, do you really understand it? Do you know it in like a theoretical academic sense? I bet not.
You just made a memory pop into my mind, and this is not even an over exaggeration. So, as I previously mentioned in our first episode of the podcast, which is a long time ago, so I'll re-mention it now. I'll re-mention it now. When I was younger, I started getting into BattleTech probably in the 90s, and my brain was too small to handle it or too unattentive. I don't know. So I really tried to get into it. People really didn't want to play with me. It was just too complicated, and so we simplified things. That's when I started to believe, for example, you can run up any elevation, because if I can run up a mountain, why can't a mech run up a mountain? That whole justification came in there. And that stayed for years. But I took a big break for BattleTech. I still read the books and stuff like that, but I wasn't really playing it on the table, playing the video games and all that stuff. But then when I eventually got back into it, I'm like, oh man, I have all this stuff from the 90s. I want to get back into it. I'm old enough to understand. Literally, we started doing this rotating GM group where we had our group would get together, and every 2 weeks it would be a different GM running a campaign, running the mission, but the campaign was consistent across all the GMs. And that, worked as well as that works, but it was still pretty good. And when I was prepping for that, I wanted to know the rules, because I'm like, hey, I'm the one that's initiating this. I got to know the rules. So I was traveling to Thailand to train and fight in Muay Thai. And so I went to Thailand, and I'm training in this place called the Lanadoimot Mountain Camp. And there's no electricity, there's no power, I know that. So it's literally just going there to train 8 hours a day. And so what did I bring? I brought friggin' Total Warfare, baby. That was the book. I brought the book with me. I'm reading it on the plane. I get up in the morning, run the 5K, go train for a few hours, go eat breakfast. And then before my lunch training, I'd have a few hours. I'm literally sitting there reading the Total Warfare book. I remember sitting in the sun in the middle of the jungle, fighting off mosquitoes. I'm like, let's read my Total Warfare book. It's the only time I had, was my only moment of peace from the training in Thailand. And I think that perhaps my physical exhaustion from the training may have impacted my ability to really soak up all the rules,
to retain the rules.
But by the trip that was over, I was done Total Warfare, and I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I'm ready to go. How wrong I was.
This sort of explains sometimes when you've tried to remember the rules for repairing mechs and stuff.
Oh man, yeah, that was a fun time. But I find that how I learn most effectively is if I'm learning a new board game, for example, I always got to get the rule book out. I look at things generally overall. I like to understand sort of the process of the game. And then I like to be thrown in there and just figure it out as I go. But some people, are trying to read all the way through, like I try to do with Total Warfare, and not retaining it. And some other people, the exact opposite. They're just like, I don't want to read. I want to be completely thrown in. So there's all these different ways we're going to learn the game, and every single one is imperfect, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to come to a situation where you're going to make you're going to have rule mistakes or rule misconceptions that are just embedded in your very innocent BattleTech player soul.
So I think the quiz is just a fun way. Maybe we'll help some people suss out their misunderstandings.
Yeah. And I'm also completely conscious of the fact that what happens if we're wrong with the questions we ask in the quiz or the answers? So I've really been double checking. We've really been being careful, because I'm like, okay, no, don't base this off our own knowledge. Look at the BattleTech manual, look at these other books, make sure it's really tangible. So we have done our due diligence in this regard.
If you find a flaw in the BungleTech BungleTest, then I guess we're bunglers.
Yeah.
I have nothing more to tell you.
Yeah, that's true.
Please send it to us so that we may know the depths of our bungling.
Yeah, we can't do the test ourselves because we know. So if you can find a mistake that is not grammatical or something silly, but something like tangible that is an incorrect rule perception on our part, hey, guess what?
Also send grammatical errors because those drive Nathan up the wall.
No, don't do it.
Just really fixate on them. Just really like nail them home about how this comma was wrong.
All right, we're canceling this episode.
All right, so what's on the quiz?
Well, first, it's 50 questions, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but we had to stop somewhere. And the one thing I will say,
I've had final exams for university courses that were shorter than 50 questions. So I don't know if anyone's going to be like, oh yeah, it's just a quick little 50-second quiz. No, this is an exam. This is a test. This is the Bungle test. You got to be serious about wanting to know the depths of your knowledge.
That is true. And the one thing that I found that was quite interesting about the process is how actually easy it was to fill it up with 50 questions. And I'm like, oh man, BattleTech is complicated. I'm barely scratching the surface here. This is so easy. So when we were designing it, we essentially built out 4 different core sections of questions for the quiz to try to touch a little bit of all of BattleTech. And we started out designing the majority of the questions, which we called our sort of boot camp section, which we put with questions, which we filled with questions that we believe are fundamentals that you need to have to play the core game without issue. These are still mistakes that you could make, but these are true fundamentals.
I have one correction, Nathan.
What's that?
You said this was the majority of questions, but it is not the majority because it's 20 out of 50. It may be the largest portion, but it's not the majority.
You fucker. You understood my point. How dare you?
I didn't understand anything that came out of your mouth.
As soon as I said the wrong word, is this what people are going to...
As soon as you said the wrong word.
It's you just went like, you just la, you... Okay, yes.
La, you said the wrong word. Your opinion's invalid. My turn to talk.
That's how we argue on the internet. You have trained well, good sir.
Boot camp seems like the sort of... This is probably the main part. This is probably the part for like, if you actually were taking one of these quizzes, this is what you'd expect to be on the questions. You know, mostly things to make sure that you can follow through them. Maybe some things that are like the common misconceptions in the back of the BattleTech manual, you know, relatively straightforward stuff.
Totally.
Easy. This is where most people you'll get the value of knowing how well you know BattleTech.
Totally. And if something comes up here when you're doing the test where you find out that you had a misconception, these are the misconceptions that are the most important to correct, because these are sort of core things. And if you just knew like information like this about the game, things would go a lot more smoothly for you. The next category is rumble seat. And these are essentially the niche sort of applications of the basic core rules that come about very rarely, but can dramatically impact the flow of the game. So lots of times, strange rule interactions that we don't really anticipate, but still come about commonly enough through core rules bumping up against each other.
Yeah, I think that this is, you know, these are the hard questions. They are not the hardest questions on the quiz, but they are the hardest questions that you'd find on a sane quiz. You know, little details, niggly things that would probably, like, in practicality take too long to like search up the specific ruling for. You know, maybe you'd look it up after the fact and be like, oh, really? That like that?
Exactly. Yeah.
These are probably things that a lot of people just elide over because it's not that important. You can get a good enough answer just by like gut feeling your way through. But technically they are the rules. So if you want to be correct, then I guess you gotta know them.
Yeah, and I know that lots of these ones are rule mistakes I've definitely made. Like when I was writing them, like, oh, I've seen this on the table or I've made this myself. So definitely, I think you'll be surprised by the outcome of some of these rules likely. The next category is special forces. And these are essentially advanced rules that are commonly found on the table. So we didn't want to
Yeah.
dive too deep into the advanced rules. There are some advanced rules there for sure that are maybe not that common because, this is BungleTech and we like advanced rules. But mainly the focus is on the common advanced rules that you will see on the game table. And believe it or not, there are quite a few that are actually put on the table that we don't necessarily consider advanced rules, but people play with them like standards. So this digs into that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious here, like how many people find these as like, oh, I didn't realize that was an advanced rule, or I guess if you don't play with these rules at your table, then it's a chance to see what your gut says, and maybe you learn about a new advanced rule to play with next time.
Totally. And the last category is entitled War Games. And these are going back now to rules that are common on the table, but are not relating to mechs. So, for example, some specific things, perhaps about vehicles or battle armor, or other elements that you don't see when you're just piloting a mech, but you see on the table quite commonly.
This area I can barely even help with. I've never actually fielded a non-mech unit to this day. So I have no idea how many people use these. Like there's some of them, obviously, like everyone's got to have used some of these. So, if you recognize all these rules and can follow them, then you are really a master of all domains on the BattleTech battlefield. We'll see. We'll see if anyone gets these.
There's a few players that I have in mind that I think will score like extremely high on this quiz, definitely higher than I would score. But I think that in general, there's going to be some elements like this that are going to be a little bit challenging. But because, everybody's a winner, either via the hug or the pat on the shoulder, we're designing the quiz in a format way that attempts to make it target every individual audience. So, for example, the quiz is going to be 50 questions. It's going to be multiple choice. It's going to be timed. So, you're going to have a limit per each individual question.
I told you this was an exam. You better study up ahead of time because you don't have time to stop and thumb through the rule books during the test.
Yeah. You won't have time to look through the rule books for sure. It'll be timed to the individual question. That's not because I'm worried about people actually looking up the question. It's because I find that most mistakes that come about on the table because of rule fatigue, as I mentioned earlier. People just don't want to spend the time to look up the rules. So they make a snap decision in that minute time frame before they have to apply it. So that's what this stimulates. You're at the table, you're making a snap decision based on your knowledge. If everyone just went to the rule books all the time and took their time reading it, we wouldn't have nearly as many mistakes, except perhaps maybe in the rumble seat category, because there's some weird stuff in there.
If you want the real experience while you're taking this test, take it on your laptop or your phone while you're at your local game store in the middle of a game. Just try to fill out the questions in between your turns without everyone yelling at you.
Oh, man. That will be challenging.
If anyone does that, please let us know. Please let us know what everyone else says.
I wouldn't recommend that. For once, I wouldn't recommend something insane. And I don't know what that says about that suggestion. Normally, I'd be like, hell yeah, on board. But for this, I feel like I don't mess around when it comes to tests, man. Okay. And then this quiz is going to be divided. We're going to try to make it so you get an individual scorecard for your individual section. So as you complete, for example, boot camp or rumble seed or special force or war games, and there's going to be some way that you get notified if you did something wrong or not, or how you scored in the section, or overall at least. So there's going to be feedback for you. So it's not like You complete a quiz and it's like, congratulations, you scored 20%. And that's it. Now, this is going to be a learning opportunity, which also gives you an opportunity to critique us in case we actually did something wrong, which we won't do because we're perfect, as we know.
Yeah, catch us in a mistake in our own quiz. Prove yourself to be smarter than BungleTech.
Okay, so this quiz, it's going to be included in this episode description, so you're going to be able to go do it straight away. So get to it when you can. What we're going to do is we're going to leave the quiz open till October 10th. And then in our 24th episode, we're going to review the quiz. And we're going to look at some of the findings and what observations we have, including, what's the most common mistake people are making? What category are people weakest in? It's probably going to be special forces. Actually, maybe it's going to be Rumble Seed. We'll see. Anyhow, it's going to be interesting just to look at the data of this and discuss it all. And spontaneous idea, we should leave a comment, an open text box at the end of the quiz that isn't timed. So people can be like, wow, this quiz was really useless. Thanks so much, BungleTech. Or alternatively, wow, this quiz was really amazing. Thanks so much, BungleTech. Either one of those two. So we can discuss that feedback as well. I think this will be super rad. The best BattleTech test ever.
I think it's fun. I think, go in there. Don't worry about it. This is a for fun quiz. I know we've got some listeners who don't play classic BattleTech, but I'd encourage you to get in there as well and just see like how far can your 21 episodes of BungleTech so far, how far can that get you in a rules test? Maybe you picked up more than you thought. Maybe you're more ready for the battlefield than you thought you were. So I would encourage anyone listening to go see how you can do.
Okay, spontaneous idea from that point that we have to include in the quiz.
Another spontaneous idea.
Yes.
Oh my God, the zeal's overflowing
today. At the beginning, we'll ask a question in which you self-classify your experience level on BattleTech. And then we'll be able to aggregate to see, okay, experienced players, this is their average score. New players, this is where they scored. This is where people were wrong. And this is going to be cool because then we can correlate and be like, wow, surprisingly, new players are better than experienced players at the rules, which actually wouldn't surprise me if that happens because there's been rule drift across the years. And, I don't know. Oh, what a cool data analysis opportunity. We're BattleTech players. We love data, right? We love it. Yeah. Ooh, I bet everyone, when I said that, cool data analysis opportunity, I bet you all across the world, people are like, ooh, yeah. If that was you, let us know.
So yeah, study up, get ready, follow the link in the podcast description, get told how smart or not smart. Take that word out. How bungly you are.
Yes.
We're all smart
here.
We're all BattleTech players. We've got giant brains, unlike other tabletop game players.
We're all winners. Pat, pat, pat.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. Modern battle armor systems also include active aid modules, which will automatically deploy to preserve the operator. By monitoring pilot vitals, the system is able to evaluate physical health, and more advanced systems will also assess neural activity and hormone changes to determine trauma levels, or even use subsurface integrity sensors on the armor itself to identify likely injuries. When a severe injury is detected, the medical systems will administer mixtures of analgesics, nootropics, stimulants, coagulants, and broad-spectrum antibiotics, similar to medipacks worn by soldiers, mech warriors, and other individuals in high-risk occupations. These systems are carefully tuned to limit damage from the injuries, but also ensure the operator remains lucid and mobile so that they can escape whatever caused the damage in the first place. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Tertiary objective, Battlefield Outcome Report segment. Initiating.
And we're back with a live reaction to the ongoing Galatea duel between Hail and Sandman. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Sally Streak.
Glad to be here, and oh boy, is this heating up to be a match of the ages.
Indeed, it is the best the Inner Sphere has to offer, facing an archaic relic from the past. Bunker versus King Crab.
Hardly a relic, Nate. The King Crab has proven itself across generations of mech warriors, and with an experienced pilot like Sandman in the cockpit, I'd place my bets on him.
Unlikely, Sally. The Bunker is the best the Inner Sphere has ever seen. With reinforced ferrolamellar armor, not only can the Bunker take more damage than an average mech, but it's twice the speed of the King Crab.
I don't think you understand what
I
you're
understand it may be hard for you to understand. After all, I have been on more battlefields than you, but I know when to trust my gut, and Hale is moving in for the kill. Heck, I bet my career on the Bunker finishing the King Crab soon.
You were saying? Looks like Sandman is the one putting people to sleep today.
We'll be right back after a quick commercial break, folks. As always, this has been Nathaniel Smithson with Ein and Boots on the Ground. Always first on the scene.
What happened? A King Crab 0000 unloaded with both his AC-20s in rapid fire mode and completely tore through the center torso of a Bunker 2. So, how did it happen? In advanced rules, standard autocannons can also fire in rapid fire mode, similar to an Ultra AC-20 firing in Ultra mode, but with a bigger risk with jams happening on a roll of 4 instead of 2. And if you happen to roll a 2, the bullet in the chamber blows up. Higher risk, but adds versatility to the weapon. Using this rule, the King Crab waited until the Bunker approached, and then unloaded both of his autocannons in rapid fire mode for a whopping 80 damage. And 60 of that damage landed right in the center torso. Despite the Bunker having ferrolamellar armor that reduced the damage of incoming attacks, it wasn't enough to save it from 3 AC-20 hits. The first hit in the center torso reduced the total incoming damage from 20 to 16, resulting in the armor taking the hit no problem. The second hit once again reduced the total damage to 16, but this was enough to go internal. But the mech was still alive with 4 internal structure left. But the third hit landed with full damage for 20 on the center torso, tearing completely through the mech. In this engagement, the ferrolamellar armor in total reduced the incoming 60 damage by 8 to 52. The total reduction was enough to save the Bunker from 2 shots to the center torso, but obviously not even close for 3 shots. Just another friendly reminder to never get too close to the claws of a King Crab.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. One such creature that has found a home among our cities is the Galatean marsh rat. Originally found in the estuaries of Lubbock's, these hardy scavengers have since made their way into every city on the surface. What sets the Galatean marsh rat apart from similar rodentiform species is its unique metabolic system. Extremely varied pathways for digestion and metabolism allow it to eat nearly any organic molecule, while also efficiently detoxifying any compounds which might harm the creature. In addition, abnormal transmembrane protein structures render them nearly immune to most known poisons, venoms, and toxins. This has made dealing with marsh rat infestations extremely challenging. as often poisoned foods left for the rats or other pests instead prove to be a delicacy, attracting large swarms to the uncontested meal. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Welcome back, everybody, to our rule check discovery segment. Today, we have a rule mistake submitted by our patron, Mech Warrior Metal Ed. Thank you, Ed. And sort of cultural, community, personal rule mistake that I made that I would like to share.
You took a rule mistake that is literally a series of mistakes by you and decided to frame it as a cultural, group tournament setting rule mistake.
I don't know how to classify it. It is just a poorly socialized, induced rule mistake, or it is perhaps the best way. I was just locked in a small closet for too long when I was a child, when I was being punished, and now I just make these like social faux pas all the time. I don't know. It's a consequence. It's all cause and effect.
So tell us where it all started, Nathan.
Well, recently, I was privileged to participate in the Calgary BattleTech League organized Solaris-themed game day. It was organized by the Council of Jeffs. Thank you, Jeffs. And I thought it would be valuable to share this because, people always say, you got to appreciate your game organizers and tournament organizers because, they really put a lot of heart in, a lot of effort and passion to not only design these scenarios, but to organize these games, to book these places, everything like that. It always seems a little bit easier from the outside before you get in and actually see the work. And then when you have to deal with players like me, it multiplies it. So I'm going to walk you through a story. The psychosis of Nathan in designing mechs. I hope to showcase how my narrative focus tends to lead me down nonsensical paths somehow.
Or in other words, Nathan's inability to follow instructions.
Yes. But, I earnestly, let's try. And, I get it, I'm 95% right, but I just tend to, the 5% that I get wrong tend to really upset the balance of the earth. So, okay, first, there's this scenario set up where we need to choose multiple mechs. We need to choose a medium, a heavy, and then another mech that we sort of build ourselves in the game mode. And they're all set within a specific era of availability. We have a BV limit and all that stuff. So first mistake I make is this is a Solaris tournament. So I'm like, oh my God, everything for me is going to be weird Solaris themed mechs. So I go and I pick the mech called the Volk, which is a mech that has a cockpit in its center torso, and it has lots of ER medium lasers in its face. I wanted to be the laser face mech. I'm like, oh my God, this is my dream. So I go on to, master unit list, select it, send in my list based on this concept of every mech is this, weird sort of Solaris specific variant. And a pro of this is that you need to bring in the actual mech to play with. That was one of the stipulations, not the variant, but if you're playing with a mech, you need to have that mech. Unless that mech didn't exist, there wasn't a model of it out there. And if that was the case, you could do a substitute. And so the Volk doesn't have a mech out there because once again, it's a laser face. But oh my God, would I love to see a model made of the Volk so much. It's so cool looking. I mean, it's cool looking in a very Cthulhu. Actually, you know what it looks like? It looks like friggin' in Star Wars, what was the thing that the Mandalorians rode? The mechanical beasts.
Oh, the basilisk?
Yes, it looks a lot like a basilisk war droid. It has that vibe, except it's standing and it's skinny. Maybe it's like a hybrid between that and a Mandalorian. I don't know. Anyhow, It looks pretty cool. I like it. I know. Use your imagination. Use your imagination. VOLKH is the mech's spelling if you want to look it up. Turns out that when I selected on master unit list, I didn't select the right time periods. It didn't load or something. So, okay, Nathan, sorry, you can't use this mech. Like, oh my God.
It was too modern.
I think it was the opposite, actually. It was now no longer available. It was too old because it was like an experimental thing. They just chucked it out. So I'm like, okay, well, I designed my entire list based on this concept. So let's just change things. Okay, I can't do these weird Solaris-themed mechs anymore. So now let's do mechs that are based on around the Battle Taser or T-Semp. Let's have all my mechs just be T-Semp themed, which is a gun you shoot people with and it's a chance to disable them. I'm like, cool. This is going to be this party. Choose the mechs, submit the mechs. Then he's like, okay, great. Yeah, these mechs are all good. But do you have models of them? And I'm like, the model rule. Shoot. I thought these mechs were so rare that there wouldn't be models of them. And I looked on official sites, but there were STLs. So, I couldn't get the models in time. So that's invalidated. So, okay. Back to the drawing board. Okay, what am I going to do now? All right, well, I'm running out of time. I'm already past the limit. I need to submit something. What's some theme that I can have? Okay, I find a mech that has Narc. Oh my God, I've always wanted to play with Bull and Narc. I'm going to have all my mechs be Bull and Narc pods themed. So let's use Mega Mech to search mechs up like that. Search mechs. Yes, I found the mechs that I need. They're Bull and Narc pods, and I'm going to have incendiary LRMs. This is going to be this great, nasty combination. I build the mechs out, about to submit them, double check something. Oh yes, incendiary LRMs don't do heat on other mechs. I'm like, why do they not do heat on other mechs? This is crazy. So I have to restart again. Okay, LRMs don't work. Okay, that's okay. Throw that out. We'll really double down on Bull and Narc pods. We choose mechs just literally with Narc, give them the ammo. Then I got to build my custom mech. Okay, and so this is the one that's going to take the most time. So I decide to bring in Ares because I've always wanted to play a super heavy in a competitive environment. But to be honest, I've never really looked at the rules that much. So I'm like, hey, time to learn the rules. So I select the mech, I build the mech and everything. I include stuff like, okay, what would be really cool? This is sort of like this big wrestler themed, guy with Bull and Narc pods. So I install like 3 or 4 different narcs on him so he can shoot 4 Bull and Narc pods around. I give him like a T-Semp cannon. I somehow managed to keep that. And I'm like, oh, I know it'd be really cool because he's so big and he can't friggin' move anywhere. He's so slow. I'm going to give him chafe pods so then I can just pop chafe pods constantly to give myself cover. I build this. I'm like, this mech is going to be great. I'm just going to pop, chafe pods, double it up. I'm going to have heavy smoke on myself wherever I am. I'm just going to chill. It's going to be a good life. And then I look up the rules for chafe pods. This is after submitting the mech. And I realize that chafe pods only go to level 2. And the mech, a super heavy, is a level 3. So functionally, the chafe pods have little to no effect. Literally, it became truly like a WWE wrestler, like walking in the door, shooting fireworks and smoke at his feet, completely visible, no defensive modifiers. Yeah. Anyhow.
Were there any conditions where you could have used the pods to cover yourself?
I don't think you can.
Because they go up to height too. It's not like 2 from wherever you fire them. You can't fire them at head height.
Exactly. So
you need to be like standing in like a cave with like your head covered.
I think if I could be crouching or something, but I think there was some sort of limitation of that. Like it's weird how the height of the super heavies work. Anyhow, I just made essentially the stupidest mech. And they were very excited to see it because they're like, oh my God, this mech has fluid guns. It has, T-Semp. It has Bull and Narc pods. It has all these things that are going to make it mean. But then I bring it in and I'm like, for the fluid guns, I'm like, I think it's ink guns. Because if you hit someone with it, it gives them like +1 target numbers for their entire game unless they have a fluid gun to wash it off. So I'm like, I'm just going to be this stupid, annoying mech that like tries to blind people and make them fall and then turn them off and then shoots chafe smoke, like just this obnoxious, stupid 135-ton friggin' thing.
Forcing people to constantly flip through the rule books for how these like insane weapon systems work.
Yes. Anyhow, so this process was me going back and forth with the the Council of Jeffs, probably like, I don't know, 3 times overall, and they had to say no multiple times, and then I still meet the deadline and I bring a mech that's completely useless. Like it's just because I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll figure out the rules later. And then I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? I've already submitted this monstrosity. A really funny thing that I think I'm interpreting this right. When you have a 3-legged super heavy, their torso twist impacts their facing. So if you torso twist to someone to like shoot them during a weapon attack phase or whatever, your facing actually changes and sets there. So it's sort of like a unique ability. But when I was playing this on the table, I sort of made me feel like I was just a stupid, big body enemy in like an online RPG where you would just be aggroed all the time. Someone would shoot me and I'm like, I must shoot you. And then all of a sudden I'm facing him and I can only walk 2-3. So it's like, okay, so now I gotta go towards you, I guess. It's the only efficient thing to do. And then someone shoots me from behind, I turn to them, aggroed at them. Oh, it was a joke. It was a friggin' joke.
Getting kited around the battlefield in your big dumb mech.
Yeah. And I know
they should have let you keep the Volk.
They should have let me keep the Volk. Yeah, man. Laserface, man. Come on, make that mech, Catalyst. I want an official one. It's beautiful. I mean, it's not beautiful. It's the opposite of beautiful, but that's why I want it. Yes.
So did you win?
I got completely and utterly obliterated. And like, it was the most ineffective lance I've ever brought into tournament play. And Bola Narc pods just suck because they don't have any effect if they hit the torso locations, which are the main like sort of chance for them to hit anything, right? Like, so you shoot, then the location determines the effectiveness. If they hit anywhere on the torsos, they do nothing. And I found out that if they hit the head, they do nothing. I got a headshot with a Bola Narc pod. I'm like, oh, this should have a cool effect, right? It's like nothing. You think it would be like a double head hit because it would spin around, but it does no damage. So it doesn't even cause a head hit. I'm like, oh my God. These are such cool on like paper and conceptually, but my God, they're so bad. They're so bad. I will definitely put them on the table again. I'm sure there are people that are better players than me that can make it work, but anyhow, people like were not intimidating me all. Like when I was the super heavy, I just got like, man, did I get ganged up on and just, I had to roll 15 consciousness rolls because every time you take a head hit, everyone takes a head hit. And he died from like just his head getting blown up. And I did special armor. So like he must have taken something like at least 25 damage to the head overall, but he just kept on absorbing it because of the special armor I had made on him. And so he just like, the pilot would be asleep and there's like a pilot, a gunnery, and this other guy who's like doing technical stuff. And it was only the technical guy awake and he's like trying to do work over the pilot's unconscious body. Wake up, man, wake up. Yeah, it was really, really, really embarrassing. Everyone was super intimidated by me at first. They're like, whoa, what's this mech? And then all of a sudden, like one person takes a little bite and then they're like, whoa, he's friggin' useless. Everybody, da da da. Anyhow, I made a big scene. I did blow off the chafe pods though for effect. I dramatized at the table. You see this massive mound of smoke, and from the top of it, a head is poking out very clearly. It's the super heavy. Yeah, so I tried to WWE theme it, but
Da, 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 da.
Okay, so anyhow, I thought that would be relevant to share.
Having heard all that, I can understand why you say this is a social bungle, or really like a full community bungle. We all participated in this bungle here. It's just a little bit of it weighs on all of us.
Respect your tournament organizers, everybody. Remember that. The Council of Jeffs, go if you see them, thank them. Thank them for their patience dealing with me.
Just thank them.
Just remember, behind every hilarious moment is an insufferable Nathan.
Well, let's get to something more tangible. Out of my past, let's talk about other people's mistakes. And this one is actually great. MechWarrior Metal Edge shared this, and I actually haven't seen this happen on the table. But when I think about it, I'm actually quite surprised that it doesn't come up more often. Yeah, it seems almost sort of logical that it would be the case, that it would, like, that the rule would be handled this way, but it's actually not handled this way. Thank God for that. So I want to read a quote of what he said, which is the discovery. But long story short, this was an Alpha Strike mistake, but it's still relevant to classic BattleTech. And he was at an event. He was essentially, there were some new players playing on the side. They had gotten some rundown of the rules, and then they were playing their own Alpha Strike game. And he eventually looked over and realized that, wow, like, that table is still pretty much all full of mechs where our units are completely destroyed. That's really unusual for especially new players and for Alpha Strike with the amount of time that had been played. So he walked over and then he said this. After a gurgling scream of shock issued from my throat, and the unfortunate player beside me had a light misting of Mountain Dew spewed on them from my mouth, I reminded the players that they only use the color of their dice for targeting and the number on their opponent's dice. So basically, what was happening is when people were calculating their gator, I'm going to say this in classic BattleTech terms, not only were they adding to their own gator, their attacker movement modifier was two things. It was the type of movement they did and also the defensive modifier they got. So for example, if I ran 8 hexes, running gives me +2 on my shot, but then my defensive modifier is +3 because the 8 hexes. Normally that +3 is not added, but it was added by these players. So basically, in the A element of Gator, he would have had a +5, which basically, it essentially would double, in some situations, triple the weight of the attacker movement on every single target roll.
Mm-hmm. And this is maybe, I don't know the Alpha Strike rules well enough to sort of like say, but it's maybe more obvious in classic BattleTech because you do have like every movement type clearly has like, this is the penalty for walking, running, jumping. This is the target modifier for based on how fast you go. So you can sort of see it, but I also like get it. Like you know, obviously that how fast you're moving affects how well you're going to shoot. It may just not be obvious that, you know, it's asymmetrical. I think it kind of needs to be asymmetrical for the game to really work well, but it is, and it might not be obvious that it is.
Totally. And think how much it would change the game if it wasn't. Like if they made the choice to say, okay, your target number, when you're shooting someone, your target number is the same as your defensive modifier from your movement. Basically, light mechs would become useless because they'd run and they'd get like a +4 target movement modifier like a fire moth rather than +2, the standard. It would just really, really, really make it tough for light mechs to be usable on the field. The faster I'm moving, which is represented by how many hexes you've moved, the more difficult it's going to be to shoot someone, not the type of moving that I'm doing. For example, you know, I can go outside and run right now, and I can run at 75% my run speed. And I think at that speed, it's going to be easier for me to leap over an obstacle than if I'm sprinting essentially all out. So I think you can see intuitively how people could make this mistake on the table.
And this ends up sort of falling into almost a class of bungles that we've seen before, which is things that will make the game last forever because no one will ever be able to hit anything.
Yeah.
You know, especially when it becomes sort of symmetrical like that, where it's like, well, everyone sort of needs to just like stop and stand still and shoot at each other, and no one has any appreciable like bonuses or penalties over anyone else. Everyone is just sort of standing there and shooting, and it's just a die roll. You're playing war at that point.
Like, people already don't like lights enough because they're hard to hit. With this rule, there'd be two reasons to not like lights: hard to hit and hard to shoot. And then you have stuff like VTOLs and the stuff that like fly across the board in vehicles. Like, the scope increase of it would change the game so much. So I think the simplification that the BattleTech system used by just limiting it to movement mode and not considering how much you've actually utilized that movement mode is just such a sensible decision. Or, I mean, the system obviously evolved around that.
Yeah, it's sort of the core like asymmetry for your unit. So yeah, it's pretty important. And yeah, without it, then it leads to the everyone shooting everywhere, never hitting anything game style. We've seen a few bungles that lead to that.
I want to share one more thing. When you walk,
so evocative. I could feel the neon yellow mist.
When he walked up to the table, another thing he said when they were explaining, it's like, yeah, we've been playing for 2 hours so far, and, we just finally destroyed our first miniature. In Alpha Strike, I guess this is very, very slow. In classic BattleTech, that sounds normal to me. But, but he was like, that's weird. And then his reaction as he writes it is, my face crinkled like a muffin paper, and I watched them carry on. If you know Mech Warrior Metal Ed in person, I want to know how crinkly his face is. Like, if he can actually crinkle his face like muffin paper, like if it actually has that like sort of, spawning in, and how commonly he sprays Mountain Dew everywhere, which is, I mean, this is very like this story Michael and I were talking about before we started the recording, but it just reminds me so much of that Summoner video game skit, if you guys are familiar with it, in the olden days, where the guy's trying to, they're playing D&D, the whole like, where's the Mountain Dew? I cast magic missile at the darkness. You see an elf. Like, that sort of level of nerddom. This is like so real. The face crinkling like muffin paper, the spray of Mountain Dew. Yeah, man. Yeah. I love this community.
Nathan is tickled, and his zeal is palpable. Much like the Mountain Dew all over my face.
Man. Well, I think that's enough for these rule mistakes. Thank you for following me along on my own journey and the journey of Mech Warrior Metal Ed's Mountain Dew spray attack. Missed attack.
Use the fluid gun on them.
Tertiary objective. Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Initiating playback. Educational training. Glorious labor for the celestial wisdom. A Capellan Servitor's Guide to Proper Conduct. Introduction.
Thou, Servitor, if you are reading these words, then your life is about to change. You have incurred a debt to the Capellan Confederation, and now that the arm of the state has delivered you to your new station, you are in a position to begin making amends through labor in service to those you have harmed. Atone, serve well and willingly, and contribute to the Confederation's strength and prosperity, and you will be able to share in the resplendent bounty of Capellan society. Resist, and you will know only misery and misfortune for all your days. The choice is yours.
Chapter 1. The Wheel of the Cosmos Brings Justice. Your Fall from Privilege.
You may be asking yourself, what debt? And protesting that you have never committed any harm to the Capellan people. In this, you show the depth of your ignorance. If you came to this place Capellan born, then you must be well aware of your shame. As a youth, you have failed to demonstrate civic spirit,
rejected your generously provided state education, abandoned your birthright, and demonstrated yourself unworthy of citizenship. As a capable adult, you may have taken state-provided food, housing, and medical care, but provided no useful labor in return. Identified by your caste as a parasite on society, you have been sentenced to servitorhood by a communal court. Or perhaps you have committed treason, displayed cowardice under fire, or committed crimes against the state, and been cast down to the ranks of the servitors by the Chancellor's justice. Those of you who, until recently, called yourselves citizens of the Republic of the Sphere, the Federated Sons, or other states that have opposed the Confederation's righteous campaign of justice and liberation, have entered servitor status due to your actions in support of those states. By ancient Capellan law, all inhabitants of any world taken by conquest immediately enters a servitor caste. Not just the military personnel who sought to kill our heroic soldiers of liberation, but the civilians who built their fortresses, grew their food, wove their uniforms, and supported the economic and political systems that stood in the path of Capellan destiny, and, all too often, provided the launching point for attacks against Capellan worlds. Following the reforms of the mighty and beneficent Chancellor Sun Tzu Lao, servitorhood is not applied blindly to all residents of conquered worlds. Those citizens of historically Capellan worlds who were able to document their actions in support of the return of their rightful regime have been exempted and will assume leading roles in the new order. Those of you who failed in your duty to bring the celestial wisdom's guiding hand to your worlds must relearn your obligations to a greater humanity under the Corvin Doctrine. The Maskarovka's keen eyes have witnessed your deeds and found them lacking. Those of you without Capellan heritage, of worlders and their descendants seeking to dilute, corrupt, and displace our culture, are adjudged to have settled on these worlds illegally and will be required to show contrition through honest service to the state.
Chapter 2. The 1,000 Tasks of the Penitent. A Servitor's Duties.
Regardless of education, skills, or prior social status, servitors are assigned tasks based on the needs of the state, as determined by the planetary government and local officials. Menial, dirty, and monotonous labor is common. Many servitors work on tenant farms, process meat on high-speed production lines, perform janitorial and waste processing duties, serve nobles in a variety of capacities on their estates, or perform any other work not suited for the talents of the citizen castes. While the state manages most servitor work assignments without input from the laborer, servitors in good standing have the right to volunteer for higher-risk work assignments, such as military service or medical experimentation, which offer a shortened term of servitor obligation, greater remuneration, or better living conditions.
Chapter 3. The Generosity of the State. Your Care and Feeding.
Once you are assigned to a work site, your overseer will be responsible for your housing and feeding. Thanks to the generosity of the Chancellor, you will receive a salary equivalent to 7% of the value of your labor, in addition to any food and lodging provided by your work site. You will work as many hours as are required to meet your daily quota. If your work site no longer requires your services, you will be reassigned by the planetary government to any other work site in need of your labor.
Chapter 4. The promise of the innocent. The future of the Confederation.
If your children are under the age of 16, or if you have children during your time as a servitor, they will be placed into a Ministry of Social Education, approved instructional program from the age of 5, and given the chance to learn the virtues of citizenship through scholarship and service to their community. Should they prove worthy in the examinations, they will be granted citizenship. Should they fail, even after being given remedial training during a probationary period, they will join you in servitorhood. The Confederation values all children as potential future citizens whom the celestial wisdom charges us to guide, shape, and shield from harm. The benevolent Chancellor has decreed that the children of servitors shall receive the full protection accorded to children of citizens, and that planetary DMs and refractors are to prosecute any abuses of servitors' children to the full extent of the law. If you are assigned to work sites that have adequate servitor-designated housing and access to educational facilities, your children will be allowed to live with you. Should you be assigned to a work site that lacks such accommodations, or should you fail to acquire a work site and become homeless, the Ministry of Social Education will remove your children to a state-run boarding facility where they can continue their education without being forced to suffer for your inadequacies. Many children who matriculate from ministry boarding facilities qualify for the ranks of the dedicated, so committed to the ideals of Capellan society that they are trusted to stand watch over others to prevent seditious deviation from service to the greater whole. Some even go on to serve and protect the Capellan people as agents of the Maskirovka.
Chapter 5. The nail that stands up is hammered down. The consequences of disobedience.
Those who reject the opportunity to atone through labor will be made to suffer the consequences of their arrogance. Violent servitors are frequently assigned to the most unpleasant and dangerous tasks, often alongside penal gangs of hardened criminals, under the watchful eye of security control agents. Those who refuse to work will swiftly find themselves banned from work sites, and without the salary, food, and shelter that come with labor. Such malcontents may be seen living on the streets, begging for scraps from indifferent citizens. The Barduk nobility often use such wretches as fodder for public reprimands, subjecting them to beatings and other abuse. The murder of an indigent servitor is considered little more than a disposal of defective state resources, and will pass largely unremarked. Think on this if you consider the path of passive resistance.
Closing. The journey's end. The rewards of service.
Whatever your crimes or background, you owe the Confederation a debt, both material and karmic. Your labor will help rebuild what your prior life helped tear down, and the knowledge that you are building a society will instill in you the philosophical understanding that each of us has a duty to provide services to others, that through collective effort, our society can bring about the prosperity and glorification of the greater humanity. After a period of no less than 10 years, or 5 if you enlist in the Capellan Confederation Armed Forces, your contributions will be assessed by a board drawn from the ranks of the dedicated, and the state will determine if your karmic balance has been righted. Provide efficient, uncomplaining service. Strive to exceed your quotas and take pride in the quality of your work. Look beyond your petty and selfish concerns to see how your work contributes to the betterment of society as a whole. Should you master this philosophy and prove it every day through the sweat of your brow, you will have demonstrated yourself worthy of Capellan citizenship and all the benefits accruing thereto.
Educational training complete. Ending playback.
This has been an excerpt from Glorious Labor for the Celestial Wisdom, a Capellan Servitor's Guide to Proper Conduct. It was found in Shrapnel, the official BattleTech magazine issue 5, and was written by Eric Salzman. This month's story was selected by our Lore Master patrons. Check out Shrapnel for more rad content from the BattleTech universe. And that brings us to the end of another deployment of BungleTech. As a quick reminder, if you haven't given us a review yet on your listening platform, please take a minute to do so. It legitimately helps people find us along their BattleTech journey. As always, you can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and Patreon, all linked in the description. Thank you to all our patrons for your continued support. Before we close, a quick word of advice from our patron technician Michael Shelley.
When introducing your friends to BattleTech, try running your first couple of games as a GM. Tell a story, ask for dice rolls, and explain the rules as you go, rather than all of them up front. And then, throw in advanced rules when it is in your player's favor.
Well said, masterful technician. Well said. Until next time, Mech Warriors, good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah. Wait, one more thing. Before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to a recent video and fundraising effort being led by the venerable Tex from the Black Pants Legion. You may remember Tex from our New Year's resolution episode, or just because he's friggin' Tex, man. Anyhow, he's a premiere scheduled on YouTube for a new Tukayid video he has produced, coming out I believe around 24 hours after this episode's release. Make sure to check it out, join the premiere if you can, and if it aligns to your values, throw a few C-bills toward his charity. Okay, now for real. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.